So we have some great speakers tonight to talk about the OpenSocial API. I'm Mike Koss, and I've been kind of an angel investor in Seattle. I worked at Microsoft for 19 years before that, and started working on with Blue Dot, and it was kind of my first experience kind of working full-time in the software startup business, and I'm now doing kind of my own startup with Roy, another partner here, so just another small thing. So if someone can hit the N key there, I forgot my remote, and just this good. N, next. There we go. So in doing a small startup and just kind of working at home alone, I really felt like I was missing a lot compared to like all the support you get, working at a bigger company and with people to talk to. And it's a lot of fun to kind of work on your own and get into coffee shops with your friends and things like that. But I was kind of looking for a little bit more kind of interaction, and working with a slightly larger startup when you have 6 to 10 people there, that's a great vibe and a great energy to it. So what I was looking to kind of do was help create a foster community in Seattle where the startups could kind of help each other out more, and exchange information about which attorneys are best to work with, or which libraries you like to use, which JavaScript libraries you use, which ones suck, and just I'm kind of a developer at heart, so I really kind of cherish that kind of technical give and take, and having the hallway conversations that you have when you have people around you working on some of the same problems. So that's what we're trying to create with StartPad. Is to create more of a community, and whether it be like a virtual community or all the way up to kind of working together in the same office. And I think kind of the highest level of interaction is going to be when people are physically located together. So that's what we're trying to create, is something where people can work together here. So help startups get out of the garage and create an exciting place to work and other people to talk to. So if you can hit the next slide for me, please. So what are we doing now? We're kind of just bootstrapping, trying to create some virtual stuff. We have obviously like the wiki and the mailing list to kind of help people communicate a little bit more. Seattle Tech Startups is a great mailing list that exists already, and I think we're not really trying to recreate that, but there's I think something to be said where we're trying to be a little bit more careful about the people who are members of this group are authentically entrepreneurs, want to start your projects, companies, and try to keep the lid on people just trying to sell us stuff, and to try to kind of control that list a little bit more, so it's kind of authentically for us, and we can be a little bit more honest in our communication about evaluating services and people we work with. So we went through, and we're kind of creating a directory, online directory of these local service providers and technical services and stuff like that. So that's right now hosted on the Google group site that we have. So if you haven't seen that yet, when you get signed up to that mailing list, you can go look at those pages there, and it's just kind of a quick way. We did that by culling through the whole history of Seattle Tech Startups and attributing all the recommendations that people have made over the last year or so. And then all the way up to kind of Seattle office space. And we're trying to create something that's really easy for people to get into, doing a month-to-month lease for people. Seattle real estate is getting very expensive, unfortunately. So, right here we had a pretty sweet deal in this space, and the rates are going up in January. So things are kind of getting tighter and tighter and getting more expensive. Seattle's still a lot cheaper than the east side. But what we're trying to do is kind of share space and get together with other companies. So if you're a single person or up to 6 people or so, we'd love to have you think about joining our group and hanging out together and working in the same environment. So we plan on doing these monthly tech talks, and I'm also would love to get some. When I took a survey of the Seattle Tech Startups alias, another thing that people said they would really love to have would be more workshops, kind of more day-long things, maybe a weekend, or something that's several hours long, where you'd actually get your hands dirty and do some coding and learn from people who have kind of been there, done that. So if you have any things that you would love to attend as kind of far as the workshop goes, we'd love to start building that list. Or if you want to help run a workshop, that would be great too. So what's next? Next slide. So what I would ask you to do is be sure you're on our mailing list so you'll get notifications of our tech talks coming up. If you have any suggestions, you can send to info@startpad.org. We set up kind of this virtual office. If you're not going to be physically located in our office space, I hang out here every day, Monday to Friday, or when I'm working in front of my computer, I keep this window open. So this virtual office URL, and I have a piece of, you'll have a flyer here that you can pick up that has all these URLs on it. So I like to just hang out here and see if we just can have an impromptu community of people that, if you need a real-time answer to something, maybe you can ping people and someone might be able to help you out instead of, if you can't walk down the hallway, this might be the next best thing to doing that. Like I said, we have a number of kind of things we'd like to offer in terms of office space. Some people aren't ready to kind of go full-time into an office, so we'd also be willing to have people, if you need like meeting space, you want to get your team together on a less frequent basis, I'd be happy to talk to you about just using a conference space or getting together in our office, for some day use kind of office space as well. So that's kind of the pitch, and it would be great to have some of you join us. And we have right now basically 3 companies working together in this office. We have faves.com, formerly Blue Dot, Right Size Media over here, and then this other little one that I started called Page Forest. So we have room for a few more people right here, and then the other space I'm looking at moving into after January has even more space available. And also a mix of private offices and open space too. So if you really want to have a little bit more of a quiet environment, you could close the door, you could do that. So anyway, let me get started today, and I think Vetri is going to start out. And so OpenSocial, a lot of you have seen it just launched a few weeks ago, and we're going to kind of describe what it is, what's going on with it, is it ready for prime time, and give you kind of a background of that, and then also dig in on some of the technical details. So let me go ahead and switch.
I'm Vetri Vellore. I'm a co-founder of a startup here called Kronos, which I founded with Madan, who's a co-founder, and another person who's in India now. We've been around for 6-7 months, and before that I was at Microsoft for 14 years, where I ran a couple of large businesses. One of the key target segments for us was the Indian educated youth market. So that's how we got introduced to Google, and as part of the interaction we ended up being in the early adopter program. The program has about maybe 20-30 app developers and a bunch of containers. So I have a little bit of information, but some of the information I'm still under NDA, but I may be able to give you some indirect answers. Sweet. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so here's the agenda. Most of you probably know what OpenSocial is, so I'm going to just quickly go over it as a refresher. And Adam and me will spend some time talking about the APIs and going over a quick sample app. And then we'll come back and talk about some of the open issues. One thing I should warn you is OpenSocial, there's a reason why it's at v0.5 now, right? It is very, very early, right? I think it has huge promise, but it has some small gaps like what's a security model or what is monetization, right? So, I can give you some ways, some tricks and tips that we have used to work on some of the issues. But it has a bunch of holes, and I can talk to you a little bit about what's being done to fill those gaps, but not much more. Okay, let's go. So what's OpenSocial, right? So this is how Google defines it. It's a common set of APIs for building social applications across multiple websites, right? So we have a problem. With all these guys opening up the platforms, we have a problem. They claim that between these containers, as Google calls them, they have 200 million users. That's 4 to 5 times more than what Facebook has, right? And as app developers, we won't be able to target each and every one of these separately, and Google has come up with this OpenSocial, right? In this ecosystem, there are 3 primary players. The people at the top who are called as containers, right? Who will be hosting the gadgets that the app developers like us will write. And then there's the OpenSocial platform itself, which I'll go into a little bit detail. And then the app developers like us, right? And the promise of this is almost in some ways like sounds like Java, right? You learn it once and it runs everywhere, right? And that is where you run into some of the issues that at least I've run into some of the issues so far. Can you go? In reality, what it is there is a core OpenSocial platform, right? It has a bunch of core APIs that are specific around people or data and so on. But the containers can really extend them in any way they want, right? They have to just support the core set of APIs, and they can really extend. For example, if you look at the APIs, there's a core API now to get profile data, right? You can ask for user profile information, including email address and gender and so on. But what Friendster, actually not Friendster, in this case I think it is MySpace has done is they extended that with movie list. MySpace already has a notion of a user's movie list. Now they have extended the API and it's available only on that container, right? So if you are ever writing an app, it won't be necessarily portable, right? As if you use that API. But that is what Flixster has used successfully in creating their application for MySpace. Now they can easily suck in users' movie information and pre-populate the user's profile with the reviews and so on. Right? And if you look at the same thing across integration points, right? OpenSocial tries to define some integration points. For example, the gadget directory. How do you discover an app? How do you install an app? What is the app install experience? Is something they are trying to define, right? And they hope to have a common framework, common experience around that. But what exactly happens to an activity stream, right? You create an activity called so-and-so reviewed a book. What exactly happens to an activity stream? How is it displayed to the user? Where exactly is it displayed? It's completely controlled by the container. In one case, it may result in an SMS message being sent to a user. In another case, it could be just somewhere hidden in the profile. In another case, it could be on the home page. That experience is really controlled by the container. Right? And the same thing actually goes across to policy also. Right? If you look at what are the business elements, what are the key policies applications are going to be subjected to, right? What an application can store, for example, which part of user profile you can store in your app database is something they're trying to define and trying to standardize. Right? But exactly how much advertisement you can do in a Canvas page, can you do any advertisement at all? Is there going to be a revenue sharing model? Is there going to be a subscription model? That's really being left to containers at this time. Right? So you would see a core set of elements, both on the technical and business side, but having a significant influence, the containers will have significant influence on pretty much all the elements that we, I think, will deeply care about. Right? I just want to use the slides as a clue. Please feel to stop me if I'm not being clear or if you have just any questions. Let's turn this into discussion.
You said something about the extensions each of the containers do.
Yep.
And can you not write core apps that work across all these containers, but only for extension features you go there?
Yeah.
There are there APIs that allow you to do that if container exists?
Yeah, you can actually, you know which container you're running inside. And in fact, you got to know that because the most successful apps usually meld into the container. Right? You don't feel this app is different from the container. And for that, you got to know which container you're running under, because Hi-Fi, if you look at the UI templates, it's green and white. Orchid is different, right? So you got to know that, and you do get that information, but that's additional customization you have to do.
Very complex problem.
It is not complex. It does. I believe actually it's a good thing, right? Because as a developer, what I think about is which markets do I want to go after? Who are the biggest social networks in that market, and how do I actually meld into their product, right? That's how I think about it. But if you come about it the other way, you think about it, I'm going to write an app and have it automatically run on all these platforms. That may be difficult unless you write a least common denominator solution. Right? Sorry.
I was looking at the OpenSocial site today, and Google talked a little bit about advertising. You mentioned earlier. They had some comment in there about unsolicited messages if sent in multiple mean your component gets cut off from communication. So you mentioned extension of advertising previously. I wonder what you meant.
So what I meant is today, if you ask Google or any of the containers, what is a monetization model, right? What am I allowed to do? For example, it's pretty clear in Facebook. You can do whatever you want within the canvas, right? There is no such clear answer at this point, right? It's not clear whether you can actually display advertisements within your canvas page, right? And also, if you look at other policy elements, like how many messages can I send to my friends a day? Such a policy has not been defined at a common OpenSocial level, and it's really being left to the containers, right? I do think it eventually leads to the right experience, because each container has a slightly different user segment. They think differently, and I think that's the right way to do it. But that does make our app, as an app developer, you have to think about it as you still have variations of your app running on different containers. Sure. The OpenSocial core platform, how many of you have done Google Gadgets here? All right, I'm surprised. It's based on the Google Gadget, right? Google Gadgets, the way it works is there's a gadget spec, which is an XML document that anybody can see, right? And in the document, you actually define both what the app is trying to do as well as app settings, right? How big the screen is, how big is your window, and so on, right? And there are three kinds of gadgets. One is the HTML is the one that's used by OpenSocial. And the way it works is you have to render the contents of your screen, of your profile page or a canvas page using JavaScript and HTML, right? And the APIs are right now available only on the client side. The APIs are eventually going to be available. For example, the API to go and retrieve a user's name is currently available only as a JavaScript API on the client side. So the way you would, for example, do something like a hello user, you would actually write code on the client. Your JavaScript code will actually call the OpenSocial API, retrieve the username, and use JavaScript to generate HTML to display the hello user. Right? It's a model that's very different from how Facebook works. Right? And for me, I did not know JavaScript very well. It was actually frustratingly difficult. But once we got better at it, it was actually, oh, this is cool too, right? And they have APIs right now. The core APIs are defined in 4 categories. There are people APIs, which are around getting user information and the user social graph. Oops. And they have this notion of an activity. An activity is what you can actually compare to a Facebook feed, right? You would actually generate an entity that shows up based on the container wherever it does, right? It's an SMS message on the user's profile. And data is something Google is trying to do, almost like what Facebook tried to do or is trying to do with the data storage. You can store any name-value pair, associate that with a user, and that way we can actually end up creating a gadget that does not need any server at all, right? You are hosted by Google, your XML file is hosted by Google, and the data is completely hosted by Google, and you don't need a server at all, right? And that is one of the models they're trying to still push, because that's how most Google gadgets work today. They do not really have a backend app server. Sorry, go ahead.
So are the other containers signing up for data storage as well?
I'm going to get to that in a minute. So the server APIs, I put a star on that, right? One of the other things I recognized about this ecosystem is it's an alliance between all these containers, right? And some of them compete with each other, right? MySpace is one of them. And as a result, they are still trying to agree on the server APIs. Right. I think it's just a little slow because of that, but they all seem to be working pretty well from what I could see. But still, because there's a large number of players involved, they are working somewhat slowly. So right now, it's only Google data, right? I hope that will be available from other folks later. Yeah. And there's a common framework that offers services like authentication, gadget discovery. Again, this is something they promised to do it. It's not available in v0.5 yet. Right? How you discover a gadget and install it. The authentication, I believe, is going to be based on OAuth, which is standard. And gadget discovery is being defined. I believe that I'm actually pretty certain they'll sort this out in the next couple of weeks, right? But it does not exist right now as we speak. Right? These are the services that will be provided. Anything on top of this will actually come from the container. For example, if you want to access somebody's photo album, right, on a social networking site, that API would be right now container specific. That is the overview. Let's actually go into the code, Adam. You want to talk about the API and code? Sure. Go ahead.
What kind of data can an app store? Like, is the people information we can store, or is it based on
Yeah,
data?
it is actually one of the things that they are still trying to define, right? Right now, the way my app works is I actually cache most of the Orchid social graph information, right? That's how my app works right now. And I believe that's how most other apps that are running on Sandbox work, right? And they have not declared any policy yet.
Hi, I'm Adam. Basically, I have very little expertise, but hacked on OpenSocial for a weekend, so before giving up, and that was 2 weeks ago. But as Vitri said, these are basically the different types of information you've got access to via Google's JavaScript library, which I would assume would be, this is part of that core that he's describing that would be the same no matter which network you were on. And so basically you've got access to people information, which is the social graph we all talk about these days. So that means as your gadget loads inside of its container, you can then request the friends list, which is a string of IDs. And then there's actually not even really any profile information associated with that. It's mostly just who are my friends. I think you can get the names and stuff out.
And the pictures.
And the photos, sure. But it's not like a Facebook scenario where you're getting lists of photos and that kind of thing. So then there's activities, which is analogous to the Facebook news feed, so I can then, as soon as you perform an action inside my gadget, post that back up to the server. And then someone asked earlier if you're able to read that, which I didn't get deep enough into that, but I don't think so. No, it's write only. And then lastly, this persistence, so it's an open key value data store, open meaning free form, so that you could then capture whatever happened, whatever was uploaded or written about in your gadget and save it to, kind of this whatever data structure you want to create. Probably something that works well with your JSON JavaScript objects. You can just serialize your JavaScript objects, save it up using whatever key makes sense, and then get it back later. So actually the first app I tried to write was like a simple rate me on any given tag. So if I'm smart, you put in the word smart, and then you choose 5 stars. And so it was initially kind of tricky to figure out, I know how to organize that in a relational database, but in a key value store where I'm going to be retrieving it and my friends are going to be retrieving it, it was a little bit tricky to figure out what should the key be. And so that was kind of the first place where I got bogged down a little bit.
Sorry, you said your friends are going to be retrieving it, so the persistent state is available to not just that user?
Yes. I think it's, and I don't know it well enough, but that was it.
There are 3 levels of the data. You can store it at app level, user level, or actually the group level. And if it's stored at group level, you and your friends can retrieve it.
Right, and so you've got this client-side JavaScript library and also the Atom pubs, it's probably a RESTful API.
Yeah, I was in a discussion with them today, and I think they're still finalizing whether it's going to be REST-based or SOAP or both. They're proposing that. So
conceivably, you can save everything back to Google's server and then in an offline fashion grab all the data that your users put in. But you can also, on any given JavaScript request, route it back to your server to then store the data or retrieve data from your server via Google as well.
You said that you can only write activity but can't read it?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the equivalent of wall is on MySpace. The Facebook wall.
Oh,
I cannot read messages
so the wall, if you just put text on a wall, say that would be data that you'd store using this persistence API. The activity, like a newsfeed item like so-and-so wrote on your wall or so-and-so would be posted as an activity to the activity feed.
And I can't read it.
Well, the API can't read it, but you as a user would see it in this sort of app agnostic area, right, whereas all the news feeds from all the different gadgets are aggregated. So it'd be visible to the user.
The API is a glitch. I think they'll be very soon be fixing it. So you can read the activity stream or just write to it.
Right?
Yeah, so Jeffrey mentioned you can store the data at the app level, user level,
And group level.
And I can store that data in Google's backend, correct?
Yeah.
So Google has some authentication scheme to make sure that you can't see my group data, or
They haven't, I don't think they've really worked the authentication out. Certainly the API covers that, like you're requesting it using a certain method that gives you the group or individual data. But you could run some kind of Firefox plugin that let you run JavaScript on anybody's profile page at the moment and kind of go in there and maliciously manipulate the data. I think that's the type of exploit that they came out with, right?
that kind of exposes things publicly that were otherwise private on the container.
Until they work out this authentication piece, yeah. Which I don't know how they'll do it.
So sort of who owns that data? In a sense, it's stored in Google's server. Do they sort of
I think that falls into the kind of gray area of, at the moment it's a sandbox. You don't really agree to any terms that I can remember when you start writing code. So the legal document's not written yet. Yeah. This is just an example of one of the sample ORCUT apps. Of course, it's the funny cat photos, which we're all here to, all of this is really about. Is how to get those funny cats on my profile. So you got a couple important links that show up here. If you can't see the URL bar, but I'm on sandbox.orkut.com. And so you've got applications which you can go into, and then you add an application either by its URL or by some kind of directory which each container or site will have to implement. And then you've got, just like on Facebook, you've got a list of apps that you've got added. And then the other things that's interesting, common to all the apps, are this little edit settings link and then view more. So view more, I believe, at least is a standard on ORCUT, where the gadget then takes over the whole center canvas page area. Yeah, so you kind of, as with any gadgets, JavaScript-based code, you kind of get a page lag when you bring this thing up, and then it takes a second for that to percolate in and the code to run and call back to the server and get its stuff.
iframed at all? So, could you go party on the whole page?
I assume so. I'm not a huge JavaScript hacker either, but I assume you.
It is iframed.
Oh, is it? Okay. I didn't notice.
Three kinds of gadgets, right? And the first one is called HTML. The second one is called inline, which is really where you can party on any element.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And they are not allowed that for OpenSocial.
Okay.
Got it. So yeah, next, please. So this is just a quick data flow kind of sketch of what we're describing. So if you had mysite.com and you basically put together this XML manifest description file, which describes your gadget and the libraries that you're going to use, which is a pretty short list at this point. And then you can actually put your JavaScript code into that XML file, or you can reference an external XML file. As soon as I got into it, I realized that you want to reference an external HTML and external CSS, some of which you can't do at the moment, but they'll probably work that out so that it all gets sort of cached on Google's server and then served up from Google's server. But so you put together an XML description file that you host on mysite.com, and then you reference that by its URL to add the app on the host site, and then the host site serves up the HTML, which runs in your browser using their common libraries, and then you can request data either from that Google's data store or the host's data store, or through a special API request it from your server and back again. That's kind of the basic workflow, but it takes a minute to get your head around if you've been doing Facebook stuff or whatever.
Is it possible, is Google involved in every transaction of OpenSocial, or is it possible to build an OpenSocial app that doesn't have Google at all?
My impression was with the ORCUT one, they would be involved with every single transaction, but on the other networks, probably not any of it would be, I guess,
The question around the Google proxy these like Facebook does? No, they don't.
Right.
Yeah, they
So
don't.
you can have an OpenSocial app that has nothing to do with Google.
That's right. It depends on how you write this. This is completely HTML that you control within that iframe. Right. They do offer a few APIs, like there's one called IG fetch content. If you are actually trying to fetch content from another site, right, or your own site and display it within the space, right, in the canvas page, you would use something like that, which is really where the caching kicks in. Right? Once you use it once, they try to cache it and serve it out other times. If you use things like that, of course, you are going to go through them. But you can make your own JSON calls. You do not have to go through them.
So when I fetch stuff from my own site, even that request goes through the container. I cannot have browser directly talking to my own site or storing data.
For the most part, unless you had an iframe kind of situation.
Yeah. iframe, you control the space. You can do whatever you really want.
Right.
Except that you still have to find a way to call the JavaScript people APIs to get the social graph.
Right. So I could have an application, JavaScript application running on the browser, talking to the container as well as my own server.
Yes.
But even
stuff from the container and storing stuff in my server.
Except for the cross-scripting issue.
right, right. Even
Cross-domain scripting issue. One of the things we ran into was that, right? We couldn't talk to two places at the same time. So we actually I believe this is one of the popular known ideas around how to go to cross JavaScript. We actually have an iframe inside an iframe. And we spent quite a bit of time trying to get that to work, but it works pretty well now that we got it to work. Right. And the way we actually, we do actually own the inside iframe, which directly talks to our application. The outside one is still running at the context of.
I can.
Have people in MySpace announced when they're going to be OpenSocial enabled?
I haven't. No.
MySpace?
Sure.
They are. They're going to be, in fact, they have a demo app of Fixter on it.
So they're OpenSocial enabled today? Or
They actually have, so what does OpenSocial enable mean? They have signed up to the Alliance, and they have one sample app that runs on MySpace. And if you ask them for the time frames, they're more like we will be available for testing, prod testing. Any developer can come and play with the sandbox sometime in the next month or two. And after that, there will be a consumer release where any app can run.
In 2008, 2009, January?
I think it's going to be 2008. They did discuss some dates, but I'm under a DM. I do think it will be early 2008.
How about Vivo? Any insight?
Sorry?
How about Vivo?
I don't know.
So how many of the networks are already live?
3 of the networks are live. Hi-Fi, which claims to have 40 to 65 million users, is live. Ning, which is Mark Andreessen's social networking firm, that's live. And I believe Plaxo, which is 20 million users or something, they are live.
Live is in sandbox, not
Actually,
public.
you can actually go and submit your gadgets to these places. If you have a gadget, you can go and submit it. Right? Even though security issues have not been solved, the gadget users can install a gadget.
Okay.
That's a surprise.
But
The only app you can really write is probably one where you're not worried about the data, the privacy of the information, right? And be read only.
Is there an approval process?
Sorry?
Is there an approval process for it?
Actually, there is one not being published yet, right? The way it works is you do submit it, and they actually put it in the directory, right? You can't really put it in the directory. Maybe that's what I mean by approval process. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I guess there are. Covered most of them.
Yep.
we may have covered most of this. You can build an application without maintaining your own server. Build an application that includes a server-side component. Yeah, of course. Expose existing web applications, access the social graph. Write one application that can run in the context of many different social websites with huge caveats about what it can do and how many extra includes you'll have. But yeah, okay. What can I do? Authentication is still an issue. OpenSocial People Data API hasn't been released yet. Currently only Firefox is supported, so even if you do install it on Plaxo, yeah, certainly in my experience it didn't run in IE. Current version of Orca, yes, as Vitri said at the very beginning, they're clearly a ways off from this being really safe for the public. Be constrained to Ajax techniques, which I kind of like you is rusty in the JavaScript. After 12 hours of hacking on it, then I was like, okay, yeah, I guess I can do this again. But what standards? Oh, well, standards-based already evidence of variations between hosts. Like I said, you probably need a lot of extra libraries to make it work.
So is there any potential issues with using Flash?
No, I think you can, just generate.
I did see a couple of sample apps that are using Flash.
Render your own tag and then. So we wanted to do a matrix that compared Facebook and OpenSocial. It's kind of comparing oranges to apples because, Facebook is its own contained, not open walled garden. But I think it is relevant because if you're making a decision based on what your app is and what market you're going after, if you have a photo app and maybe High Five doesn't support photos, then you'd still probably strongly consider doing it on Facebook. So I just went down all the Facebook features in the Facebook documentation and tried to see, what is there an analogy in the OpenSocial world, and you either got things that are in development or things that are up to the platform, basically. That is where the differences are. And I do think that's informative because, it's not, I think there was I think it was impressive when they announced this thing. You can write one gadget and it's going to run everywhere. Well, okay, but all it can really do is get a list of friends and their name and their picture. And even that, you're going to have to kind of write special code in different places to make sure it works. So I don't know, I think that is kind of a reality check worth having. But I'm also a big Facebook fanboy, so.
What's your sense, guys, overall of the corporate governance behind OpenSocial? The reason I ask that, I've been involved in many of these anybody but X plants, right? Used to be anybody but Microsoft, used to be anybody but Google, now it's OpenSocial, anybody but Facebook. Some of them work really well. You get W3 behind them.
But they do seem to be keen on finding a solution, right? It's not like I'm going to piss you off and walk away. I think it's the market pressure. But I do think they will converge, but it's going to take time. Facebook owns the container and the platform and the API. It's much easier for them, right? Obviously. I do think these guys are motivated enough and they feel threatened enough that they will converge, even if it takes a little while longer.
Is there any notion of going to W3C or something?
I've not heard that at all. And in fact, it may happen later, right? I haven't heard that at all. I do think these it depends on how we measure it, right? If I look at, do I have another group of 50 to 100 million users to go and target? Absolutely yes, with OpenSocial, right? Are all of these guys going to stay converged on the same vision? I don't know. Some may actually fall off, but I still think a very significant chunk is going to be left. Sorry.
Maybe a silly question. What's Google's interest into this?
What's Google's interest?
Yeah, you have the application you give developer, and then you have MySpace or Friendster or iPhone. Why is Google in the middle and what's in it?
Couple of things. One is they have their own container, Orchid, which apparently has 20 to 35 million users, which is the largest social network in India and in Brazil, right, and a couple of smaller countries. I personally believe that's where they started. But when you are behind, I don't think you can go out and say, here's my platform, right? My platform also. So they have now tried to define this as an open social, which makes it easier for them and for the other guys to attract developers. That's my take. Right?
Facebook's about to pass Google.
Yep.
It's the fourth busiest website on the planet. People spend 1 second or 1 second a day on Google, 20 minutes a day.
Yep. You.
This year, Facebook passes in terms of advertising share, volume,
Yeah.
and you're right, Orchid is big in Brazil and India, but it just gets killed
They-
fast. And it's just advertising dollars.
Which is what 10 times more.
I understand that, but that's 2 levels down in terms of the buzz and the areas of marketing managers of little companies.
Yeah.
Most CMOs are being
Yeah.
asked, what's your Facebook strategy? They're not being asked what's your Google
Yep.
strategy.
It's because it's brand advertising versus.
That's right, reality. Yep. What's fundamentally happening is they're going to each other's turf. So these guys have to get into that turf now, right? It wasn't the case last year.
So when I kind of started reading about this, or just kind of even starting back when Facebook launched the API, there's this kind of feeling that all this data that we're creating, our social networks, that belongs to me. It doesn't belong to Facebook. And so, at my first blush, you'd say, oh, great, now there's an open API. My data is now portable. It belongs to me. I can take it anywhere. That's not what's happening here, I guess. I mean, there's still another shoe yet to drop if we're to get to the point where people own their own data and they're kind of portable across systems and can interoperate with my friend. You can create a friend list in one place and have it be used elsewhere.
Yeah, that's right. Nope.
This is all still like the host owns you.
Yes. Yes.
And you can run a few apps on there.
You have to think about who's trying to enable it and what's the incentive for them, right? So
this is not like an open source, open social. This is open social for developers and for platforms.
That's right.
But what you want, there was a couple of really interesting posts. One about Mark Cuban. We talked about this. Another one that O'Reilly posted right after that. It was a very interesting post. When they first heard about it, it sounded very good. Look at it now. After Tim O'Reilly's really pandered. He's really said, this is not what we want. This is just, okay, great. It's good for developers if it actually meets what you guys are saying, write once and throw it multiple places. But it's got nothing to do with what you're talking about, where you own the network, right? You own your social network.
Yep. But if there's app-specific data, of course, that's portable, right? All your music preferences and iLike is portable because iLike will have the ability, or should have the at least ability, to link your accounts across these various social networks.
Oh, really?
Right?
So you can migrate your...
Indeed.
If I say I like a band on Facebook, it's going to show up in my...
No, I don't think it'll happen automatically because the user has to link these accounts, right? Once you link it, the data is owned by iLike, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So I was going to ask you about that briefly. If you have multiple accounts, let's say you have an account on WhatsApp and Facebook, right? There is a Facebook app that...
That's right. That's right.
How do you associate those user IDs? Like, you're the same person, but OpenSocial probably thinks you're different.
That's right.
Hi-Fi and on Orbit.
That's
you're
right.
The same person. Is there a way to say, here's
That's right.
alias for like a...
Yeah. The API doesn't help you at all in doing that. Your app needs to find a way to enable users to link these profiles, right? Or maybe somebody else is going to create a platform on top of this platform that actually creates a common user profile. But I've seen data both ways. I've seen data that users don't want to do that, right? They do want to actually have multiple personas and they don't want them to be linked together, right? So,
things in one place and nice things.
yeah, exactly.
Family one place.
Yeah, I know where he does his nasty things.
So an extension of this question, so you're saying it's possible for the app to enable, to let the user link their different accounts in the different containers together. Can I then go to the next level and actually show my MySpace network inside my app when it's running and working? Or is that against the term?
Yeah, MySpace wouldn't.
You can't do that. You can allow people to link their identity, link their different identities together, but you then can't take the data from one container and use it.
It all comes down to what
Don't know. Exactly. Don't know. If MySpace thinks it's good, they'll enable you to do it, right? It'll come down to the container.
Someone will do that, but shutting them down.
There's no official policy on page yet.
Yeah, I would not say no. Yeah, not yet, right? Because I do see they are evolving, right? And they're evolving actually at reasonably good space. Because in the time I've been working with them, they actually made very good progress, surprisingly good progress. So, go ahead.
So something that I'm kind of on my radar, but I don't know too much about, is Google Gears, which is a platform for taking online content and making it available offline.
That's right.
Is Google making it easy to interface that with, say, a container on OpenSocial? For example, I have a site, everyone has their friends, they want to be able to take their friends list offline. Is it easy to write a container in OpenSocial that can sync up with Google Gears and take that information offline for users?
No. OpenSocial does not do anything to make it easier. It doesn't come in the way either.
Okay.
Right? I mean, OpenSocial right now is those 4 API sets, JavaScript-based API sets, right? Over a period of time, they may enable it, maybe make it easier, but right now it does not.
Okay.
All right.
When you said the Orchid library is version 0.5, is that referring to the interface or the actual implementation? Like, are the features that you talked about, they'll be there? Are they already in the interface and just not implemented?
JavaScript is there, but buggy.
Okay.
And the JavaScript library is version 0.5. And then the server side is just not there yet.
Okay, so the interface is basically in place and not significantly expected to change.
That's right. That's right. The existing interfaces will not change significantly. They are planning to add more, obviously, right, between now and V1.
I just want to say my experience with the Blogger API is the opposite of that.
Really?
They suck. They repeat their API multiple times, and I had to rewrite the code, next day to make it work again. Maybe I lost the beta Blogger API about 9 months ago.
Yeah.
And I just removed support from our sites.
Wow.
Because it was impossible to keep up with breaking the API.
Yeah. When I trawl their Google Gadgets news groups, Gadgets have been around for a while, right? I see many of these complaints there.
All the
right?
blogger guys are doing Twitter now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have noticed some of those same posting, and we run into some of those, but in our case, at least they were able to fix them quickly.
Yeah, Adam, just on that last slide before you jump ahead, is there any notion of a mini feed in these containers? I know you said news feed, yes. Is there such a thing as a mini feed?
It's left to the container, actually.
I haven't seen one on our foot. It's just a basic, like a code.
That's right.
You start to see like
But it almost seems like you have to have different application on each of the social networks, right? It's not like you can have, it's providing you one API, but the application.
And there's no invitation mechanism either. Like your main discovery mechanism is, oh, I saw it on your profile, there's an add button. But there's no common way for me to invite my friends to an app. So it's really,
Yeah, and V0.5, that they are fixing soon. But yeah, right now it doesn't have an invite one, right? But in general, I'm in agreement with you. I do think that if you want to have a successful app, you have to be deep, right? And that also, it's not just API level, you have to understand who's using this hi-fi thing, right? And do these customers really want to share information about the concerts or not, right?
But even in terms of containers, there's no feature parity in terms of what they provide. So
only the smallest core, right?
So the only advantage I see for OpenSocial is it's reducing the learning curve for me. I just need to understand one API, but I still need to design different applications for different networks.
Yeah. I'm in 100% agreement, and I do actually go back to the marketplace first, right? You are trying to win in the marketplace, so you better build an app that's for that marketplace. And if OpenSocial makes it easier, then you're better off, right?
So what has Facebook said about this API? Anything in terms of would they support it themselves at the down level?
I'd be very surprised if they did. That'd be interesting, though.
You have to be part of the alliance to become a container.
Good question. I've not seen any containers that are not part of the alliance yet. Right.
The container Google group sounds like you will be able to write containers.
Perfect. Yeah. So can you just go back to the previous one? Yeah. I think we covered all of these, right? Policy, it's not been addressed yet. Security, client-side APIs, right down to what's the basic protocol of this, SOAP, rest to what do the APIs do. Monetization. For example, if you talk to the Salesforce guys who are part of this, whose container is part of this alliance, right? They actually are thinking of a model where your app could be earning subscription revenue, right? Because their model currently is completely based on subscription. That's how Facebook generates revenue. Salesforce generates revenue, and they think that if you publish an app, they can actually share revenue or something, right? So this, I see answers on one hand from revenue could be subscription based all the way to be pure advertisement AdSense based, right? So that's not closed yet. And the whole notion of directory naming, is there going to be a short name like I like, and is there going to be a common short name? Is your app going to be the same name in MySpace as well as in Orchid? Those are issues that they are working on right now, right? Not resolved yet.
So Salesforce actually uses security today, right? Their app has...
Yeah, it does.
So how do they deal with no security in OpenSocial?
So the security happens the moment actually you enter, right? For example, Orchid, you can say that this user, give me my friends, and it will give you the friends of only that user, not anybody else. So security does work from an Orchid point of view. The problem is when how the client calls the API, right? The way the client calls the API is in JavaScript, you make this call saying that for this user, right? And anybody can actually say this is a user, right? I could write my own XML file and say, I'm now Krishnan, right? The browser to the JavaScript is where the security is not enforced now, if I'm making sense.
So you're saying that I could sign up as a paying Salesforce user if I wrote an application and I could make an OpenSocial API call to Salesforce and spoof some other user.
From the OpenSocial, you can spoof any user. From the OpenSocial API, it's an XML file that actually makes a JavaScript call, and the JavaScript call actually says, here's a username, right? And that's how people easily hack this, right? But there are a couple of ways one of the things we did, for example, in our application was to, for example, at least do a reverse DNS lookup to see whether the call was coming from google.com, right? And that gives us a little bit, not a whole lot, but at least a little bit of security, right? On top of that, if Facebook has done something very specific to enforce some security, I'm not aware of it, right? But you'd hope so. But the container is not available right now for a lot of apps, right? It's not live yet, so it's not and these problems will be solved, right, before these guys go live. Fundamental problems, they will be solved, in my opinion, very soon. The plan is to actually come out with quick rev of these APIs, right, every few weeks. And in a couple of months, I hope they'll get to V1. And these will be solved before that. What we are getting is an early peak, right, something that's way early. Yeah, a preview release to get a sense and gives them some momentum in the marketplace.
But so even if you solve this problem, any application developer can actually write a crawler to crawl the social graphs for everybody on Orkut, right? And then maybe even download that data on his own server.
Every user?
Right. So you start with one user, and then you start crawling from that user, and then you get the list of all his friends, and then you take that friend's ID and get his.
With this current JavaScript API, you mean? No, you can't. You have to be. They have this notion of a viewer and owner, right? Right. If the viewer is the owner, then you can get the properties of the owner. You cannot get properties of somebody you are not, right?
So right now you can spoof, but later on you will not.
That's right. Right now, again, we're getting an early preview, right? Such an obvious problem. They're going to fix it soon.
So you had said earlier that Google doesn't have to be in the equation, so I can talk, my JavaScript can talk straight to the container, correct?
To the container, yes. Yes.
So if that's the case, why can't, and Salesforce.com is a container, correct? So if that's the case, why can't Salesforce require like a cookie on your machine in order to do authentication?
I'm sure the containers can do some authentication, right? They can do their own specific, but kind of breaks the whole model of OpenSocial at that point, right? They may do it though. They may do it just to work around any timing issues. But I believe they are moving towards an open auth model, which should actually solve the federated authentication.
Yeah, that's what you need.
Yeah. Yep. And next one, what's next? So this is, I think we covered this already. I believe most of the containers will be coming online, really available for app developers to be, and consumers to deploy their apps by sometime early next year. And the client APIs, again, will be available soon. I believe they are planning on reviewing every few weeks, right? Maybe 2 to 4 weeks. And they plan to have something by early next year from an API point of view. At that point, I do believe that it will solve some of the fundamental issues. And I'm not that optimistic personally. This is my personal view on how well they will do on solving the policy issues. Because as an alliance, you have to work with all these guys. And Google has so far seen and taken an approach of we'll leave it to the containers to solve this problem if it's a policy issue, right? For example, Friendster could say that you can actually save the information while MySpace can say you cannot save the social graph, for example, right? That is one I'm not that optimistic about, but I'm very optimistic the technical issues on authentication, those things will be solved. Right?
OpenID, any connections?
No, they have decided not to do OpenID.
That is a connection, not to do.
I don't know how public it is. It's open auth. Yeah, it's open auth. That's what they're going with. Sorry, do you have a question? No. All right. So that's all I have. That's all we had. Anything else? Do you guys have any other questions? You're going to run out and start writing these gadgets? One thing I would recommend is actually you start playing with Google Gadgets, right? That API set is actually pretty well baked. It's been around for a while. It gets you familiar into how to write these gadgets, right? And the OpenSocial APIs, there's really not a whole lot to learn right now. So if you want to play with them, call them, that's fine. But I would not start building a very significant OpenSocial app at this point, right? But getting started on gadgets is something that I found to be useful.
So the data in the sandbox environment right now, is that real or
it's real? It's real, yeah. But the problem is if you're asking for, sorry, Adam.
I think in the case of Orkut, it's filtered to other users.
Exactly.
As well. So if me and I are friends in the sandbox, and I have 20 other friends, all in the same here in Orkut. I don't know the other ones.
That's right.
So it's filtered.
So you can't go and download all the data.
That's true. That's probably why they did it that way. Great.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
So again, thanks for coming, and we have a really cool cake. We're going to bring some cake out, and so you're welcome to hang around here and socialize a little bit more, and we'll get the cake set up in a couple minutes over here. Tech startups and attributing all the recommendations that people have made over the last year or so. And then all the way up to kind of Seattle office space. And we're trying to create something that's really easy for people to get into, doing a month-to-month lease for people. Seattle real estate is getting very expensive, unfortunately. So, right here we had a pretty sweet deal in this space, and the rates are going up in January. So things are kind of getting tighter and tighter and getting more expensive. Seattle's still a lot cheaper than the east side. But what we're trying to do is kind of share space and get together with other companies. So if you're a single person or up to 6 people or so, we'd love to have you think about joining our group and hanging out together and working in the same environment. So we plan on doing these monthly tech talks, and I'm also would love to get some. When I took a survey of the Seattle Tech Startups alias, another thing that people said they would really love to have would be more workshops, kind of more day-long things, maybe a weekend or something. What we're doing now, we're kind of just bootstrapping, trying to create some virtual stuff. We have obviously like the wiki and the mailing list to kind of help people communicate a little bit more. Seattle Tech Startups is a great mailing list that exists already, and I think we're not really trying to recreate that, but there's I think something to be said where we're trying to be a little bit more careful about the people who are members of this group are authentically, entrepreneurs, want to start projects, companies, and try to keep the lid on people just trying to sell us stuff, and to try to kind of control that list a little bit more so it's kind of authentically for us, and we can be a little bit more honest in our communication about evaluating services and people we work with. So we went through and we're kind of creating a directory, online directory of these local service providers and technical services and stuff like that. So that's right now hosted on the Google group site that we have. So if you haven't seen that yet, when you get signed up to that mailing list, you can go look at those pages there, and it's just kind of a quick way. We did that by culling through the whole history of Seattle, several hours long. We'd actually get your hands dirty and do some coding and learn from people who have kind of been there, done that. So if you have any things that you would love to attend as kind of far as a workshop goes, we'd love to start building that list. Or if you want to help run a workshop, that would be great too. So what's next? Next slide. So what I would ask you to do is be sure you're on our mailing list so you'll get notifications of our tech talks coming up. If you have any suggestions, you can send to info@startpad.org. We set up kind of this virtual office. If you're not going to be physically located in our office space, I hang out here every day, Monday to Friday, or when I'm working in front of my computer, I keep this window open. So this virtual office URL, and I have a piece of you'll have a flyer here that you can pick up that has all these URLs on it. So I like to just hang out here and see if we just can have an impromptu community of people that, if you need a real-time answer to something, maybe you can ping people and someone might be able to help you out instead of, if you can't walk down the hallway, this might be the next best thing to doing that. When you have 6 to 10 people there, that's a great vibe and a great energy to it. So what I was looking to kind of do was help create a foster community in Seattle where the startups could kind of help each other out more and exchange information about which attorneys are best to work with, or which libraries you like to use, which JavaScript libraries you use, which ones suck, and just I'm kind of a developer at heart, so I really kind of cherish that kind of technical give and take and having the hallway conversations that you have when you have people around you working on some of the same problems. So that's what we're trying to create with StartPad, is to create more of a community, and whether it be like a virtual community or all the way up to kind of working together in the same office. So I think kind of the highest level of interaction is going to be when people are physically located together. So that's what we're trying to create, is something where people can work together here. So help startups get out of the garage and create an exciting place to work and other people to talk to. So if you can hit the next slide for me, please. So we have some great speakers tonight to talk about the OpenSocial API. I'm Mike Koss. And I've been kind of an angel investor in Seattle. I worked at Microsoft for 19 years before that, and started working on with Blue Dot. And it was kind of my first experience kind of working full-time in the software startup business, and I'm now doing kind of my own startup with Roy, another partner here, so just another small thing. So if someone can hit the N key there, I forgot my remote, and just this good. N, next. There we go. So in doing a small startup and just kind of working at home alone, I really felt like I was missing a lot compared to like all the support you get, working at a bigger company and with people to talk to. And it's a lot of fun to kind of work on your own and get into coffee shops with your friends and things like that. But I was kind of looking for a little bit more kind of interaction, and working with a slightly larger startup